So the first thing we're going to do is make a new substance. Now, what is a substance? A substance could be almost anything, but they're all kind of the same. So let me explain that. We're going to go File, New Substance. Now, like I said, a substance can be almost anything, but what it really is just a graph that you're going to put nodes onto, and you're going to tell those nodes to do something and maybe expose some parameters to end users, that kind of thing. And depending on how you set up your nodes, it can be either a texture graph, a material graph, contain materials and textures, any number of things. So we're going to start with materials because that's super easy, and then we're going to take those materials and kind of split them up, put them on an object really quickly, and then we're going to make a custom graph based on that we can put another object through, go ahead and texture it up, and we can even go into Substance Player if we wanted to, or do a custom graph within Substance, shoot that over to Painter, and use that as a custom node. So we got to start somewhere though, so we're going to start with physically based metallic and roughness. This is basically just a PBR model. If you want to know more about that, Substance Allegorithmic has a really good guide on what PBR is, how those materials work, and I'm not going to go into depth here, but you're going to see it kind of interactively working as I create a material, so you'll get it. So we'll start physically based metallic roughness and hit OK. And all that does is give me, this is really all it does. It gives me a blank graph with 4 outputs. And because it's physically based metallic model, we have a base color, which is kind of like your, what they used to call a diffuse map, an albedo map. This is just a color map. Below that, it's got your normal map. That's going to contain your baked normal information if you have any. Your roughness map, and that's just going to control how shiny your object is and how how it's kind of broken up on your surface. And then a metallic is basically, is it metallic, yes or no. There are some outliers to this. There are a few materials that don't play nice exactly with this model, but I'll show you a node that'll kind of give you a little workaround for that. So just a basic overview of Substance Designer. We've got our graph here, and our graph contains some output nodes. And basically we're going to be plugging stuff into these output nodes, and those output nodes are going to show up on this little cube down here at first. And we're going to kind of modify those on the fly and see them update real time in our little output viewer here. And we're just talking about materials now. Here's your base, it says base color, but basically this is your 2D view. As we start messing with noises and stuff and dropping in bitmaps, we'll play with the 2D view a little bit more. Here's our library. We're going to be doing a lot of searching around in here and grabbing cool things out of here. And I think we're ready to go. So what I'm going to do is hit my space bar, and that's going to pop open a menu which allows you to grab some nodes that are in here. I think as of one of the more recent updates, those nodes are actually available in here too, under your compositing nodes section here. But it's easy enough just to go ahead and hit your space bar, and it'll pop this menu up here, as well as it'll also be up here. So I'm going to be hitting my space bar because this is what I've been using for the last couple of years, so just easier for me. So I'm going to hit my space bar, and we're going to start with a uniform color. And this is just simplest of the simplest. It's basically just an RGB color. If I double click it, you're going to see it pops up some parameters over here in this section. And we get to choose a color. We can either type in the RGB value, or we can click this little box here and choose a color like so. Or we can go hit pick, and anywhere you go in your interface here to go ahead and pick a color. So I'll go ahead and pick this little off green here and choose that. Go ahead and hit that X button. Now, what can I do with this? This is just a uniform color node with an output. This output is orange. That means it's a color output. There's basically 2 kinds of outputs. There's a color output and there's a grayscale output. And depending on the node, you can kind of use both. So what I can do with this uniform color is go ahead and hit Control C, Control V, and that'll paste an exact copy of that uniform color. Now, if I double click this uniform color, it goes and it selects it and gives me access to its parameters. And at this point, I can tell it, you know what, don't be color, be grayscale. Now you're going to see what that did was change this into a grayscale node, and I don't have an RGB picker in here. I have a grayscale picker. It shows me color that I can choose, but it's just kind of it's forcing me to choose grayscale over here. Or you can just do this luminance slider over here. So it goes black to white, so you can just kind of change it on the fly. So same node, it's a uniform color node, only this one has been turned to grayscale, this one is color. So let's go ahead and start plugging these things into our outputs. Now again, all an output is just something that gets output to our object. Now this can get a little bit more complex depending on the material or the texture job that you're doing on your character or whatever. But just the bare basics, I'm going to take this node, grab this orange dot, drag it into my base color. Now that's going to update in your scene. If for some reason it doesn't, just right click out here and do view outputs in 3D view, and that'll just force any of these outputs to go ahead and show up in your 3D view. There might be some instances where it kind of breaks a little bit, but I'll show you where those might happen. So anyway, we've got our uniform color plugged in. Normal, I'm going to leave it alone for now, but we're going to mess around with the roughness a little bit. So I'm going to take this grayscale node and plug that right into our roughness. And right away, you're going to see, let's see, make this a little bit bigger. By the way, you can just click and drag to make these interface items bigger or smaller. And you can actually pop these things off. If I want to just grab this thing and go throw it over on another screen, I can certainly do that. So very, very customizable interface here. And I can also, as you can see, I can put it in a little tab view. I'm going to go ahead and do a tool or a Windows reset layout and go ahead and get us back to where we started. So anyways, when I plugged this uniform color in, what it did was make it kind of like Play-Doh looking, right? So how we control that is this roughness color that's being input into this roughness output, and then this roughness output is going onto my object down here. So if I change the slider, if I make it more black, you're going to see it starts making this more shiny. If I really crank it down, you're going to see how shiny this thing can get. If I crank it all the way over to the right to where it turns white, it turns into just a pure matte, kind of rubbery looking object. So that's basically how we're doing. I'm just going to put this right down here in the middle-ish. Now we can get down here to metallic. Metallic, generally speaking, is either on or it's off. It's either a metallic object or it's not. Now there's going to be some instances where maybe you have a little bit of dirt on it and that makes it a little less metallic, maybe some weirdo materials that kind of mix it a little bit. But how we're going to treat this is basically on or off. And because it's just black or it's white, you can do that with just a uniform grayscale color. We already have one, so you can just copy paste this one, or if you want to hit spacebar, you can go in here and do a uniform color, double click it, make it grayscale, throw that into metallic, and by default, this grayscale color is black, so it is not metallic. And as you can see, it is not metallic. However, if we double click this and crank this all the way up to white, you're going to see as I crank this up, it's going to get more and more metallic in my viewport here. So you can kind of see it has that metallic sheen. Those are just those options working together. So we've got those options. Now, I don't have a normal map, any normal map information yet. As we kind of refine this material, we'll get into that. But you can see how easy it is just to make a basic material. Here is a basic off-green mint kind of material, right? Super easy to do. So you know what? Let's go ahead and name this. So I'm going to go ahead and save this package. And I'm just going to be lazy and throw it on my desktop. And we will name this metallic mint green. So this is going to be our metallic mint green package. So we named our substance package here, and I'm going to go ahead and name the graph too. You can hit F2, and then I'll go ahead and select that for renaming, and I'll call this the same thing. So we have a package name, and then we have a graph name. And whenever you see this little asterisk, that just means you need to save it. You can go ahead and hit Control S. That'll go ahead and save them. So now that I have this nice, tidy little graph that's just a material, I can go ahead and use that anytime I want. In fact, if we might get into this, where you can actually go on here and you can save it to a special area on your hard drive, and then you can choose these PBR materials that'll go and look for it and organize it depending on how you have it labeled, all that good stuff. So you always have access to any materials you've made if you set it up right. And it's super easy to set up. So now that we've done that, you're also going to see I have a little new little substance uploader thing here. So if we do, we can do an SBSAR or an SBSAR ASBS. We're going to do this in a minute, or at the very end maybe. All this is going to say, hey, I want to shoot this over to Substance Designer, put my name on it, give it some exposed parameters maybe to the end user, which we'll get into, and anybody can go into the forum area and go ahead and just download this thing and use it in their own graph. So if you make a really cool material, feel free to do that. This material isn't really that cool, so I'm not going to do that for this one. Now what I can do though is I can go ahead and do a file, new substance, and we'll just do another physically based metallic roughness. And so now we have a completely open graph, right? We just have our output nodes here, waiting for some inputs, and you can see our object changed colors. It's just the default black that we had. So if I want to actually use my metallic mint green on this new object, all I have to do is grab this graph, go ahead and drop it in here, and you're going to see by default, I've got a base color, normal, roughness, and metallic. If I double click these, it'll show up in our 2D view. So if we go to my roughness, here's our roughness value. Here's our metallic value is white because we did pure metal. And if I go and drag these on here, you can see I can go base color to base color, normal to normal, roughness to roughness, and metallic to metallic. You can do that manually. However, if you don't want to do that, what I'm going to do is go ahead and, Didn't want to do that. By the way, if you want to grab any of these nodes and drop them on a line, you can actually go ahead and add a hue saturation levels to this. I accidentally did that. But if you'd like to change this green, go ahead and say, hey, you know what? This hue, I want to change it over to a blue, make it a little more saturated, and maybe darken it up a little bit. So you can actually put a node that will interrupt this base color. So if I double click this output node on this node here that we dragged in from our original graph, it goes from green through that hue saturation lightness out to our base color. Pretty cool. But I'm going to go ahead and delete that because I didn't mean to do that. So I'll go ahead and drag my base color here. I'm going to delete all of these. So you can go through one by one and click it and delete, or you can just click drag and then delete. And you're going to see I have access to all of these little dots here. If I go over here, and you're going to see I'm in standard view. So we have standard view, material view, and compact material view. So if I hit 1, and I'm in 1 by default right now. If I hit 3, that's going to go to compact material mode. What that basically does is it behaves smartly. So if I drag this out, it's going to automatically connect these. So how does it know that these, if I click 1 here, these right here want to actually reach out and connect and plug into these by default automatically? If I double click these nodes, these output color nodes, or these output nodes, I'm sorry, you're going to see it has a usage. So we have an RGBA. It's a usage that uses an RGBA, and it's called base color. So if I want to throw this thing for a loop, what I can do is actually hit my space bar, throw another output node in here. It's down here at the bottom. And that'll just be a blank output node. Right now, this thing has no usage, but let's give it some usage. So I'm going to go ahead and hit add item, and let's go ahead and make it an ambient occlusion. That'll be good. So we'll make this an ambient occlusion. Now, just to be nice, what I'm going to do is actually go in here and name this identifier. I'm just going to call it AO for now. And the identifier isn't anything the end user sees. That's just going to be something that you would use if you're going to call to this output in a function or something, or anything behind the scenes you need to do to it. That's how it's going to be identified. The label is what the end user is going to see. So I'm going to go ahead and name this ambient. Make it nice, put a space in there, capitalize it. And I will go ahead and I'm going to leave the group alone, but I'm going to explain why you might not want to do that in a second. So we have this, and we don't have an ambient occlusion output. So it doesn't know what to put in that ambient occlusion, and we don't even have an output for it, but that's okay. If we want to give this thing an output, what we can do is go back and double click our metallic mint green, and here we are. So I can go here and hit spacebar and choose a new output, and I'm going to double click this one, and we're going to call this one, we're going to add a usage item, we're going to call it ambient occlusion. We're going to go ahead and name it AO. We'll label it ambient occlusion. And we're not going to group it, but we're going to see why that's a bad idea in a second. So for ambient occlusion, I'm just going to control, copy, paste this white. We're just going to do a white ambient occlusion, no biggie. And once we're done with that, I'm going to go ahead and just hit Control S just to make sure this is saved. Then I'm going to go back to this package where we had dragged this out. And you're going to see we have an updated output, and that is ambient occlusion. And we double click this one. And we can drag this manually over here to ambient occlusion, and it'll plug right in. One thing we can also do is I'm going to delete all these things here. Now, if I go to compact material mode, which is 3, you're going to see, oh, it's got my materials plugged into one, but my ambient occlusion is kind of hanging out all by itself. So I got to plug that one in manually. That's because we didn't put a group name in the ambient occlusion on our original material. So if I can double click this. Another thing I can do actually is right click this and do open reference, and that'll actually open this thing in a new tab. So instead of double clicking over here and then having it replace my graph and then double clicking over here having it replace my graph, I can now very quickly just go between these two. So now here's the graph with our metallic mint green material plugged in, and then here's metallic mint green. So I can go back here, and if I double click the metallic node, if I zoom in here, you can kind of see at the top metallic is its name, its label. If I double click this, you're going to see it has a group named material. I'm going to copy that, double click my ambient occlusion, and say, hey, group material. Go ahead and save our mint green here, and then go back to our new graph. And then it doesn't look like it updated. Let's see if we can make it update. Let's see, 3, 1, 3. No, it's not going to do it. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and delete this, and I'm going to re-drag in my metallic mint green. And there, it's all one material node. So if I hit 3 now, or sorry, 1, it's going to go base color, normal roughness, metallic, ambient occlusion, all grouped together very nicely. If I hit 3, they'll compact all together. If I drag all of these out at once, they're going to all plug in because they know that my outputs over here were usage, ambient occlusion, and this output here is a usage, ambient occlusion. It's going to plug right in and sync up correctly.